At the 1600 rating level, many players can't resist giving a check whenever they see one. But unnecessary checks often waste time and even throw away the advantage. Let's look at how this mistake costs games. So this is white to play here, and let's try to understand. White is down a pawn, but black's king is in the center. Black has not completed the development. White's knight is also well placed on e6. So we can say white has some compensation for the pawn. Now, of course, white's pawn is under pressure and white's knight is under pressure. So in this position, it seems like, all right, let's just give this check. Knight g7 check and then try to target the king in the center. Now, we have to remember that do we have pieces placed in such a manner that we would be able to take advantage of that king? Because if we don't, and we don't have in this position, then the issue that becomes is, yes, we have given the check, but after king e7 is played, where will the knight go? So earlier, we are just down a pawn, so we could try to do something and then get more compensation for it. But how about the knight? I mean, we simply don't have enough to get activity for the knight. Black's plan is very simple. Just rook g8 and then this will go. And white's not able to do much. This is just a lost position. So please remember that just because your opponent's king is in the center, just because that king feels weak, it doesn't mean that you should give the first check that comes into your mind. It might make your situation worse. And here, the knight is trapped. So white should play something like knight d4, improve the knight's position and defend that knight. And if knight takes g4 is played, no worries. c4 can be played to try to remove the knight and then play knight c7 check. Now black can decide to not capture that and then maybe play king e7 or something, but then knight c5, keeping up the pressure on this one. If b6, then the knight will move somewhere, and if this will fall, then there will be this. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's not the end of the world if you lose the g4 pawn. You might be able to create some activity, but knight g7 check, then you'll lose the knight. So for example, if in this position, if let's say king e7 is played, then this is under pressure. If b6 in this position, then as I said, knight can be moved. But if you want to play more actively, rook e1 is also there, because you can get knight e4 with a tempo, and then you're going to get activity. You're not under that much pressure because you are just down a pawn. So not like that knight g7 check where your knight would be trapped. So please remember, don't give the first check that comes into your mind, because not all the time checks will help you. So let's go for the next position. So this is white to play here. Sorry, black to play here. Black is actually down in material. Black is down a pawn. So black's rook is putting some pressure on the queen side and his knight is under pressure. So black has to make a decision. Should knight g3 check be played, because that is coming with a tempo, or should knight f6 or knight d6 or something like that should be played? So please remember that when you're giving a check, you must try to understand that, okay, what next? Is my piece actually well placed there, or I'm just giving a check for the sake of it? Because when you give knight g3 check in this position, the problem is that white can play the move king f2. Where is the knight going? These squares are taken away. So only two squares, f1 and h1. H1 is really bad because king g2. Now the knight is trapped. So this is one of the simpler ideas for white is just to play rook e1 and then try and get that knight. That knight can't go anywhere. This is just lost. So and you can be like, all right, but what if knight f1? So please remember, knight is not that effective when it comes to a flank pass pawn. And in this position, white can force exchange of rooks by playing rook e1. And then if this, then this pass pawn can be pushed. And if the king joins in, no worries. Then with the help of this king and the knight, these pawns will be targeted, and then yeah, this is lost for black. So knight g3 check. Because of that, either the knight would get trapped or the exchange of rooks will happen. Either way, bad news for black. So yes, knight d6 or knight f6 does not look as active since they don't come with tempo, but they have their own ideas as well. For example, knight d6, there can be these type of plans. Then we can try to create some activity. Opponent can try to play this. Because if knight c4, then rook e2 type of stuff. But no worries, we can still try to, just play rook g1. And if h4 is played, then we can just try to, say for example, play knight f7, keep the knight there. Is it an unpleasant position for black? Indeed it is. I'm not denying that. But is it loss for black? No. With rook and knight, maybe black can try to create some sort of activity. So please remember that when you are in a worse position, don't give that unnecessary check, because it might quickly turn that worse position that is defendable, that you can make comeback from, to a completely lost position. So I'm also preparing full courses on chessneurons.com on themes like exchange of pieces, restricting pieces, open file, slowly trying to push without making the mistakes and giving a chance to the opponent to make a comeback. It will be structured lessons where I'll go much deeper into each of the topic to increase our understanding. So those will be part of chessneurons.com very soon. So let's look at the next position. This is white to play here, and things are looking good for white. White has the queen, but things are not so simple, because black has got rook and a knight for it, and 3 pawns, by the way, 3 pawns for that. So if white is not careful, then these 3 pawns, this centralized knight, it can create some issues. So in this position, but a queen and rook, they are active, they're keeping some pressure on the king side. But please remember, just because you're trying to target your opponent's king, remember this: checks don't mean progress. So sometimes what we feel is that, okay, I'll give this check, then this, then this, then this, then this. No, not all the time. Checks will help you. Not all the time. Checks means progress. And in this position, the most tempting check seems to be, so one of these two checks, queen h7 or queen h8. So, we don't want to blunder queen c8 check. So, yeah, but if queen h7 check is played, king f7. Where is the next check? No, there are no checks. And in this position, yes, there is this open file, but it's not like white can make use of it. And now black can try to push the pass pawn. Black can try to put some pressure over here as well. In certain cases, maybe even push this at some point. This is not that great position for white. Actually, it is black who will try to push for the win now. And similar thing with queen h8. It's a bit more flexible than queen h7, because maybe the queen can go here and then go after the pawn. But that's not the most important thing. Black can be like, all right, you want my pawn, you can take it. This, you take this pawn. This, if this, then there is knight e6, and suddenly, so the knight has gotten into defense and these connected pass pawns are there. It can be trouble for white. So in such cases, what you can try to do is, instead of giving a check, you can actually restrict your opponent's king activity. So what you've done in this position, you've taken away that f7 square from the king. If king f8, of course, rook h8, that's game over. And in this position, you are keeping an eye on the rooks as well. There is queen e8. So not just a mate threat, but this rook also gets under pressure. So in certain lines, like if it was not a mate, then this rook would be hanging. Now, if black, of course, drops queen e8, then there is queen d5 check and this rook will go. But then you'd be like, all right, what if something like rook e6 happens? No worries. So in this position, what we can do is we can play rook g1, put pressure on this one. So knight cannot move because this is hanging. And if g6 is played, and then there are a good number of moves for white to have the advantage. But every pawn move weakens some squares. So what has happened is, because the pawn has gone from g7 to g6, now there is this. So white can play rook h1 again. And then there is this idea actually of rook h7. And then if, it will soon be made. So this is bad actually. So please remember that especially when you're trying to target your opponent's king, not all the time checks mean progress. And in the position that we saw previously, this one, just because it seems like, oh yeah, I'm able to give a check and then my piece is getting improved with the tempo. Don't be like that. Try to see where the piece is heading towards after that check. And sometimes you might recognize that in the quest of giving the check, you might be actually worsening that position of your piece. Thanks everyone for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.